could both of you explain who you are and your current role here at UC Davis?
Sure. I'm Leslie Kemp, and I'm the director of the Basic Needs Initiative for UC Davis and the Aggie Compass Basic Needs Center.
Hi, yes, and I'm Sal. I've been a chef for about 20 years now, and I am the food truck coordinator for Aggie Compass here at UC Davis.
Awesome. And how did you guys get into kind of your current roles? Like, what was the trajectory?
For me, I was in the tech dining in the Bay Area, and it was fun while it lasted. But after doing it for so long, it got kind of tiring, especially when the pandemic hit. The pandemic changed basically everything for everyone in the food industry, and it gave us that time that we needed to really evaluate our lives and what we wanted to do in the food industry. And as for me, my journey was that I didn't want to be in this toxic industry anymore. It's not what I signed up for as a chef. It just, it is what it is. That's just the industry. And while being unemployed, I hopped from one job to another, and I wasn't happy with what I was doing in those companies. Until finally, I found this position over here at UC Davis. The project sounded really cool. It sounded something that I can actually make my own and have a part of me in it, which for me that meant that I would be able to create an environment that felt safe, that wasn't filled with that toxicity that this industry carries. And that's kind of what was appealing about this job.
I came up in higher education and making higher ed more accessible and doing work in public health. It really felt like just a job to me until about 9 years ago when the university started paying attention to food insecurity. And they started the Global Food Initiative at all 10 UCs, and I got involved from a communications perspective, and it lit a fire. I just became passionate about it, and there wasn't a job there for me. It was just, I was contributing to the marketing and communications. And as it grew, there were more and more opportunities. And I was like, I got to get involved in this because it was more than just punching the clock. And I actually felt excited about it and making something happen here on campus.
What are the numbers surrounding food insecurity for students at Davis, but broadly speaking, UC's, CSU's, students in general?
In about 2016 and 2018, the UCs published their dual reports on food and housing insecurity. And it was revealed that as a UC, we had about 44% food insecurity rate. So it was about 50-50 split between low and very low. The numbers for food insecurity rank in low and very low. So low food security is when a student is stressed out about where their next meal is going to come from. It's not knowing if your paycheck's going to last the whole month or the whole week. Very low food security is when you're actually skipping meals. You are not eating all day, or you're eating a banana and you're making it last all day long. That's very low. So that's almost half. And that's consistent at all the UCs, all 10. So we drilled down, and at UC Davis we had about 41%. That's still pretty damn close to half. These numbers have since been reflected nationwide for students at traditional four-year universities and colleges.
At this point, we've all heard the cliche of the broke college student eating nothing but ramen. And students aren't often thought of as being food insecure. They're not the quintessential person that you think of when you think of food insecurity. Why is it that students are particularly vulnerable to food insecurity?
Well, what you mentioned earlier about the kind of starving student eating ramen, eating pizza, didn't we all do that? And unfortunately, these days, that's a myth. That doesn't I mean, it's not a thing. It may have been 20 years ago when I was in school. I had a job, I had work study, and that was enough to get me a car, and it was a beater, but it was a car, and feed me. But these days, fast forward, and commodities are triple in price, and the dollar doesn't buy, and it buys 1/3 of what it used to buy. And then you've got the incredible rate of inflation in the housing market nationwide, but especially in California and particularly in Davis. And so now you've got students who are working the same amount that I worked 20 years ago, and they just can't make it anymore. The other thing that goes into it is the cost of attendance. So the universities calculate the cost of attendance and base financial aid on that, and it's just not an accurate calculation anymore, considering especially the cost of housing. So it's just not the same game as it used to be.
Yeah, that's a lot of factors are contributing to it, and food is often the first thing that people skip out on. It's the easiest to really tighten the budget and oftentimes go without, unfortunately. How does skipping meals affect maybe one's school performance and whatnot?
Yeah, there's actually lots of research in this area, a lot in K-12, and some recently coming out of UC San Francisco about how that affects executive function in higher education. And it just, as you can imagine, slows everything. Not to mention that you combine that with, if you don't have enough resources to buy food, you usually don't have enough resources, financial resources in general. You're deciding between paying a light bill or paying tuition and buying food, and as you mentioned, food goes first. It's the easiest thing to cut down on. And so you've got students making these really hard decisions, and they are being judged against their more privileged peers who don't struggle with these things.
I read on the Aggie Basic Needs website that, a financially struggling student, once they get into Davis, once they're at Davis, they're in college, they're going to school, but a lot of those financial struggles don't go away. And so, it's like, how do you follow up with those students who, it's awesome that they're there now? Like, what other resources do they need to finish their time at Davis and schools?
Yes, and if we bring students here, it's on us to graduate them, right? It is on us to give them the support they need to graduate. And so the other thing I wanted to mention is that over the years, especially at the UCs and at UC Davis, we have done a great job of making our higher education more accessible and going and encouraging students and helping students with financial aid from low-income zip codes and bringing them in to UC Davis for an education. However, we have not done a great job at supporting them, keeping up with the support they need once they get here. And so that's what we're looking at now. We're playing catch up with bringing students in who need extra support and not having it.
Awesome. And so kind of going towards the food truck now, Sal, what are the benefits to the food truck model?
Yeah, I think the main benefit is that we take away a problem from, a student. Like I remember, what I went through when I was a teenager and dealing with food insecurity, and a lot of it was like, where am I going to find food, right? So I spent a lot of time going to friends' house, and because that was, basically the only place where I could find a home cooked meal, which I'm super grateful and super thankful for their families and for those friends that I had that supported me through that hard time in my life. But it's like, to try and do that every day, that is a lot of time, So I think like one of the benefits with this is like we remove one of those problems from a student where they can focus on what's important, which is their studies. They can just invest all that time that they would in trying to find food and put it back into creating a future for them. And I think that's the main benefit. The other benefit is like, I think going back to what I was saying about creating an environment, creating a culture that we can talk about food insecurity, right? That we can take that stigma away from them, right? And make it, the norm, because it is the norm,
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, the stigma around being food insecure, and especially at a university where, like you said, there's a lot of privilege, but there's a lot of people struggling as well. And so people compare themselves to their peers and whatnot. So the food truck model reminds me of, the pay what you can farm stand that we talked to at Coastal Roots. It gives people the dignity of going to a food truck like anybody else. It's, the model is like really awesome for removing the stigma.
It's for all students, whether you have money, you don't have money, whether you need it or you don't need it. That's where the pay what you want model or pay what you can model comes in, because first of all, one of the things we've done is had it so that you pay on your smartphone, right? We don't accept cash. If all you have is cash, you get a free meal. But what a student will do is come up to the truck, scan the QR code on their phone, order what they want, and then they're brought to a payment screen, and they can opt to pay $0 or however much they can pay at the moment. So nobody sees the student taking out a credit card or cash, so nobody knows. The folks working at the food truck don't know when the order comes in whether that student paid or didn't pay. So we've kind of wiped out that part of it. So they really seem to be resonating with the pay it forward, and that seems to be going a long way towards creating community around the truck.
Who works in the food truck, and what type of culture are you trying to foster for those working in the kitchen there?
Yeah, so the people that work in the food truck is basically all students. And I think that that's like, the added benefit to me. I really enjoy the people aspect of this industry more than the food aspect. In a weird way, like food ended up becoming second to the people aspect. And me being able to work with like students and, inspire them or try to teach them, lead them, mentor them in their growth, it's probably one of the most important things that I can do. And I'm super grateful for that opportunity. I think like the most important thing that I can show them is, a different view of what I believe the food industry should be. Everybody has that, mental image of like, Hell's Kitchen, right? Or like Kitchen Nightmares, where like, everyone's getting yelled at by the chef and all that stuff. And that's something that I didn't want to happen at the food truck. I was very open and honest with the student staff that we have. And I told them in the interviews as like, I want this to be a student-for-student program. Let your idea shine, whatever it is that you guys want to do, how you guys want to run it. Like, I want this to be a student-for-student program. And I think like at first, they were, they didn't know what to do. They were a little skittish about how to do it. But I think towards the end, like everybody started feeling more comfortable in the rules, and they started giving their ideas, their input. And I think you can really start noticing the change on our social media. Like that is basically ran by students. It's their ideas of what they want to put. And if you look at our social media compared to like any other UC social media, it looks a lot different. It looks more like people actually behind the program versus, a marketing page. And I think that's something that is super important, because it puts out that positive energy, where it's like, no man, like we're human beings trying to do what human beings should be doing, which is helping out the person next to us. And that is, ultimately what I have, focused a lot on the food truck, is how to move that energy, that positive energy from the food truck into everyone out on campus. And I think for the most part, like it's been a success. I think a lot of people come to the food truck and, they enjoy the meals that we have for them. They enjoy the concept. They, for the most part, feel comfortable. We definitely try to make them feel comfortable in the sense where it's like they could come up and ask us questions, any questions. We're not gonna, sugarcoat things. We're gonna be honest about that, about, the situation, how much food we have, what we can do, what we can't do, what we can provide. And I think there's been, a lot of challenges with making sure that, like, when people come to the truck, they feel comfortable. They feel comfortable to ask, for, hey, let me get 5 meals, let me get 10 meals, or let me just get one. And I think like that's something that it's a constant battle to try and remove that stigma and that challenge of being judged by someone else, because at the end of the day it's like we don't know exactly what each individual's body needs, right? An athlete can go through 10 pounds of food, whereas an individual that doesn't work out, they just might need one. And we just don't know, people's physique. Yeah, just really creating that environment of this is a safe space. You come here and no one's gonna judge you. We don't care. We're not gonna ask you oh, well, do you really need that much, or things like that. It's no, if you need it, man, we trust in you that you're gonna put that food to use, right? Even if it is hey, you're getting food for you and your friend. Because again, at the end of the day, we don't know if that friend that you're getting food for is food insecure. Maybe they do feel a little shame of coming to the truck, right? So we don't want to ask those questions. We don't really care. We're here to feed people, and that's what we're gonna do. It really is about just having an honest conversation about the situation at hand. And I think that's the success that we've had at the food truck.
Yeah, no, it's making it, more personable. And then, maybe this is kind of circling back, but what were the origins for the food truck?
We had a Basic Needs Advisory Committee and a couple of students that were really interested in doing a $2 meal, a $2 universal meal for anyone on campus. We're going to go through the Associated Students Coffee House. They did a lot of work on that. Some of the other work they did on that was they did some focus groups and realized that students didn't necessarily want a free meal, right? They wanted to, there was some dignity in paying what they could for the meal. So in that instance, we decided on a $2 meal. And then the pandemic happened, and that got completely derailed. We're going to revive it when our coffee house is kind of back to its former glory. But in the meantime, our vice chancellor was approached by a single donor who really wanted to do something to fight food insecurity. And so we kind of got together and thought, well, let's take this $2 meal and see what we can do with it. Food trucks are popular, obviously, and the $2 meal kind of morphed into this, well, why, somebody said, well, we should do free meals. And we're like, yeah, but, the research, the students, dignity. So we said, why don't we just have the students pay what you can? And we looked at some models of restaurants that are out there and applied them to the food truck. And that's kind of how that bubbled up. We also wanted students to be able to have fresh food that was, prepared fresh daily. And that's where partnering with Student Housing and Dining Services came in. So they prepare the food fresh. We pick it up, package it. We put out 500 meals a day, Monday through Friday, sometimes more. And we kind of augment that with recovered food from the markets that are also run by dining services around campus, so the grab-and-go food. We also partner off campus. In the fall, we're partnering with Tandem Properties, and they have an organic farm. So they'll be able to provide us with fresh-picked organic produce that'll be provided free to students from the food truck. And so, it's just kind of become a flashpoint for other ways and other ideas for providing food to students.
All of that's super awesome, and I just really appreciate you both taking the time to speak with me today. It's been an honor to talk to you about some really good work that's going on at UC Davis, so thank you. You can find the Pay What You Can food truck at UC Davis at a couple spots around campus during the school year, Monday through Friday. Like they said, they're putting out a lot of meals, and it's a great resource for anybody struggling with food insecurity who attends UC Davis. So go check them out. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sun and Soil. You can find us at Sun and Soil Podcast on Instagram. You can find us at Sun and Soil Podcast on YouTube. You can find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, of course. So thank you so much for everyone who took the time to listen today. And thank you, Leslie and Sal.